Throughout the histories of Arda, there have been untold champions of the powers of the good, as well as many that sought the darkness of the shadow. In our previous video, we dug into the archives to discover the mouth of Sauron, a corrupted man who clung to the heel of Sauron, becoming one of his greatest servants. There are many beings in Arda who truly sought the light throughout the ages, and one such being is Glorfindel. The one with the golden hair, Glorfindel, is truly one of the finest elves across the ages, playing a vital role in the events that took place throughout Middle-earth. Greetings all, I'm your guide, the Archivist. Today I will dive into the life of Glorfindel, his downfall, and ultimately his return to the world in the climax of the Third Age and beyond. Appearance and origins. It was said that Glorfindel was tall and straight, his hair was of shining gold, his face fair and young and fearless and full of joy, his eyes were bright and clean, and his voice like music, on his brow set wisdom, and in his hand was strength. Glorfindel was one of the most famous and well-known elves across the ages, known for his golden hair which was often considered to look yellow. His strength of will and great physical strength would lead him to perform great acts across the ages in many of the great battles of the world. He was beloved among the elves of the Gondolin, and many wept when they witnessed his passing during the Battle of Cirith Ûrnaith. He led his house admirably during the fall, and was exceptionally loyal and dedicated to the protection of the king and also the people, having a great relationship with all those around him. His courage and sense of duty led him to sacrifice himself and much of his house in the defense of the refugees of this specific battle as they escaped, but it is said that he would have defended them even if there had been fugitives of any rank. This courage that he showed would also be displayed when he defended Frodo from the Nine Riders centuries upon centuries later. His character and sense of purpose and duty has always been a great boon for the forces of good, and he helped to shape the events for the better in many instances. The archives show that his origins are said to be that of a house of princes and one of the noble houses of Gondolin. His golden hair has always suggested that he would likely be one of the Noldorin Vanyarin bloodline, in a similar vein to Galadriel or Finrod. He does however also show incredible loyalty to the House of Turgon, despite them having dark hair, and this may suggest that he also has a relation in this area as well. In the archive, The Complete Guide to Middle-earth, it's suggested that Glorfindel is in fact a member of the House of Finarfin. The archives also hold the passage, "Suddenly into view below came a white horse, gleaming in the shadows, running swiftly. In the dusk its headstall flickered and flashed, as if it was studded with gems like living stars. The rider's cloak streamed behind him, and his hood was thrown back. His golden hair flowed shimmering in the wind of his speed. It appeared that white light was shining through the form and the raiment of the rider, as if though through a thin veil." Glorfindel's grace is often mentioned. Powers. It's already mentioned Glorfindel was an extremely capable elf, with great physical power and endurance as well as an extremely keen mind. He was able to face the Lieutenant of Gothmog, the Balrog Lord Thorngorfin, and survive for a time whilst others escaped. He chose to use an elven sword and a small elven dagger, both forged in Gondolin. It is said that the dirk was lost during the Fall of Gondolin and could even be the very one that Bilbo Baggins finds in the Troll's lair and renames Sting later on. When Glorfindel is re-embodied and returns to Middle-earth during the Third Age to aid the Fellowship in their fight against Sauron, Manwë gives Glorfindel powers rivaling that of a Maiar, making him beyond that of a regular elf. He was considered upon his return to Rivendell to be one of the most powerful elves by some margin in the region, and has an almost angelic-like presence and aura, even giving the Black Riders reason to flee at his mere appearance to them. His powers are also shown when he tends to Frodo's wounds in the books, having clear knowledge of healing and medicine. Early origin and First Age. It is known to the archives that Glorfindel was born in Tirion sometime during the noontide of Valinor, and as was previously mentioned, was descended from a house of princes. It is also known that during his early years, he followed the house of Fingolfin during the flight of the Noldor, but he would play no part in the kinslaying Alqualde hereafter, instead likely being elsewhere during this time. Once in exile during the First Age, Glorfindel took part in the Battle of the Lammoth, being a part of the House of Fingolfin, and was part of the host of Turgon that assaulted Morgoth during the Dagor Aglareb. Likely because of his deeds following these campaigns and his exceptional battle prowess and spirit, once he followed Turgon back to Gondolin, he was appointed as the Lord of the House of the Golden Flower, one of the captains of the king himself, which was a huge honour. By this point it seemed he was already well loved by the people of the Gondolindrium for his deeds and his character, and this only confirmed to them of his prestige and raised his esteem further. Glorfindel was appointed to many important and dangerous tasks and missions by the King Turgon during this period, being heavily favoured by the king. He also fought in the Nerneath Adonadiad, being part of the honour god that protected the king during the retreat towards the Pass of Sirion after the huge defeat suffered by the elves. The Fall of Gondolin. When FA 510 came, the forces of Morgoth attacked Gondolin after Maeglin betrayed the location of the city to the Dark Lord. Glorfindel played a huge role in the collapse of the city, struggling with his followers to hold back the tide in the Great Market, planning an ambush, but instead being caught unawares themselves and attacked by a great fire drake. They cut their way out along with the help of the House of the Harp, and together they and the House of the Golden Flower regrouped at the square of the palace and held as long as they could. Once they arrived at the square and joined Tuor, along with Agelmoth and Ecthelion defending the square against the insurmountable odds. Ecthelion's legendary fight with Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs, took place here, where they were both slain after plunging into the fountain together, but not before the King Turgon was also slain. Seeing no way to win, the Gondolindrium escaped through the Idril secret way, whilst Glorfindel nobly defended their rear whilst they sought safety. They continued to flee through Cirith and Thoronath, till a second Balrog, presumably Longorthin, the second Balrog Lord, came upon the refugees and moved to slaughter them outright as they fled. Glorfindel leapt forward to face the demonic creature whilst his followers watched in disbelief from afar. Glorfindel fought valiantly, defending off the feral attack of the ancient creature, hewing its iron helm in two before piercing its belly with a sword. The creature fell back off the cliff, but at the last moment grabbed Glorfindel's golden hair and dragged him to his death over the edge. Glorfindel's body was later borne up by Thorondor, King of the Eagles, who flew down into the abyss to rescue Glorfindel's broken body, returning it to his people who buried him high in the cliffs of the mountains that surrounded Gondolin. After this moment, it was stated that yellow flowers grew on his death mount. Despite the lack of life there, life's testament to the great warrior's sacrifice. The Second Age. After Glorfindel's death, his spirit departed to the Hall of Mandos, where many go after their mortal body dies, and he dwelt there for a time during the time between his death in the First Age and the Second Age. However, due to his incredibly heroic action in saving many lives of elves, he was re-embodied by Manwë and resided in Valinor for a time, recounting events and preparing for another role in Middle-earth. A long time beyond this, in SA 1600, Manwë sent Glorfindel back to Middle-earth on behalf of the Valinor as an emissary to help influence events for the future, as well as giving him powers that would allow him to rival that of a Maiar, including foresight, healing wisdom, and an angelic presence. The Third Age. Glorfindel returned to Middle-earth at some point during the Third Age. It's likely that he resided in Lindum for a time with the other noble elves, such as Gil-galad, Círdan, and Elrond, descendants of Tuor and Idril, which he likely would have felt a kinship towards. However, once the middle of the Third Age had come, he was residing in Rivendell along with Elrond and a few other key figures. Glorfindel also played a role at the Battle of Fornost according to the archives, turning the tide against the Witch King, whilst also foretelling the ultimate fate of the evil creature. Once the battle was finished and the Witch King had fled, Glorfindel predicted that no mortal man would ever destroy the Witch King, and this eventually came to pass in the Third Age, when Eowyn of Rohan, a woman, and Meriadoc Brandybuck, a hobbit, would slay the Witch King with each other's help. The War of the Ring. Perhaps Glorfindel's most significant role to play in history was during the War of the Ring, when he was sent by Elrond in TA 3018 to search for Frodo Baggins and his company. He attacked and drove off Nazgul at the last bridge, even hunting them for a time. He found and led the company during the books for some time, only stopping to allow the hobbits a small amount of rest. When the Nazgul approached again, Glorfindel put Frodo on his white horse Asfaloth and bade the horse take Frodo to Rivendell. Asfaloth outran the black horses of the Nazgul and crossed the ford of Brien, leading to Rivendell, which then swept the Nazgul away with an enchanted torrent. Frodo is weak and close to death at this point after being stabbed with the Morgul knife of the Witch King. Glorfindel then led the company to safety at Rivendell, where they would be able to see to Frodo's wounds effectively. This sequence of events would ultimately define the entirety of the War of the Ring, Frodo taking the ring to Mordor in the end. At the Council of Elrond that happens there after this sequence of events, Glorfindel took part, sitting in a position of honour alongside Elrond and Gandalf at the meeting. He actually passed the suggestion that the One Ring should be sent to Tom Bombadil or cast into the sea, but Gandalf quickly retorted that the ring would have resurfaced eventually, as it had done in the past. Glorfindel could also have been a part of the Fellowship. They believed his power would not be suited to the mission, and would only draw attention to the covert mission that they had planned. After the war. Beyond the War of the Ring, there are not many entries of Glorfindel into the archives, but it's reasonable to assume that he eventually sailed to Valinor with the rest of his kin and lived in the Undying Lands for the rest of time. Before this event, however, Glorfindel, along with Erestor and the Sons of Elrond, came to Gondor to witness the wedding of Aragorn and Arwen, which would have been a great period of happiness but also a tragedy for the Undying Elves. Glorfindel is not actually included in the Lord of the Rings film adaptations, but he actually played a role in many of the key sequences of events that led to the ultimate victory of the light. And so I have now covered the content for this video, but if there's anything that has been missed, please share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to like the subscribe and like waystones down below. Na Luego Vanadvan. Until we meet again.